Hey friends, are you struggling with player engagement and immersion? We've all been there. Today we're going to tackle this challenge head on with 7 tips that I have tested in hundreds of games so that we can improve player immersion at our tables. Let's get to it. First and foremost, it's important that we remember to actually mention that our players are in a fantasy world. It's all too common for us to gloss over the details that stand out in our worlds because we're trying to get to the next piece of action or the next interaction that our characters are going to have. We don't take the time to remember to mention the fantasy elements that are in the world around them. Some of those that are often changed and subvert the normal expectations are things like the color of clouds in the sky in Avernus, or the fact that in the Forgotten Realms is a trail of starlight comets following Saloon, the moon, through the sky. By mentioning that trail of tears that are in the sky, we attempt to ground our characters into the fictional world that we have established. So anytime you have some kind of thing that subverts expectations that's not the norm, but would be perhaps the norm for your characters, give an extra special effort at putting emphasis upon that fantasy element so that you draw your players' attention to it and thus draw them into your world. One of the strangest methods of drawing your characters into your world and increasing both their immersion and their engagement is to use your players' names. While utilizing character names obviously seems like it should draw people into the action and keep them grounded in the fiction, by using a player's name, you increase their engagement by drawing their attention to you, and then you shift that attention down to their character. This is especially useful in situations where somebody hasn't been speaking in a little while. You draw their attention, then shift it to their character to engage them and immerse them in the world that you've created. It's also really useful in combat so that you can help people to recognize that they need to separate from the "this is who I am" making decisions down to the "what does your character do," which helps to twist their thinking just a little bit so that hopefully they're going to take the actions that are appropriate to their character instead of the actions that are just optimal or seem like the most sense to take in a chess-style tactician top-down view. We want to get people down into their characters' heads so that they can decide things based upon the circumstances as they would see it and with the filter that their character adds. Another place where I personally have made a lot of mistakes is in the visuals department. It can be really valuable to provide a picture of a scene or an NPC in order to give players something to look at and a little bit more detail. The old adage of a picture being worth 1,000 words is certainly true, and I can assure you your players don't want to hear an extra 1,000 words out of your mouth for every description. And I know mine don't either. One of the places where this can get a little tricky is that while providing a picture of the scene can help to enhance the immersion of your players, if you provide a top-down map style section, and in particular if you're on any kind of format where miniatures or tokens might be able to be moved around under player control, you're essentially breaking them out of the world and into the tactician standpoint of looking down at things, or perhaps just engaging people in the exploration of going around every corner at breakneck speed to make sure they can see the whole map on your virtual tabletop. Don't worry, it's not that I have trauma there or anything. Speaking of distractions, if you haven't already subscribed to this channel and liked this video, you should probably go ahead and do that now. Don't worry, I'll wait. Okay, on we go. Providing a picture of the scene or the NPC that they're talking to can help to enhance the description that you give and can help to ground players and let them see what they're working with, and it can spark a lot of great ideas later when they see some of the details and can riff off of those with their own choices. A fairly heavy-handed method for maintaining immersion is to use the Murky Mirror approach that I first picked up from the Angry GM. Essentially, the Murky Mirror means that everything that is said at the table is in some fashion or another mirrored in the world that you're playing in. This basically means that anytime that your players say something, their characters are either saying or doing something based upon the words that are said. It does provide a great benefit in that if you bring up this approach on a regular basis, when somebody is, say, for instance, comparing skills and saying that they have a +5 versus the other one having a +7, for me personally, that means that they are talking to one another and comparing notes about their skills and experiences so that they can determine who is the better at something. It takes the mechanical, crunchy game speak and turns it into the narrative. The idea behind this is also that if somebody is making a snarky comment about the king in the king's presence, then he hears them making that snarky comment. You can't just push the, oh, this is above the table thing after the fact. Though the Murky Mirror is kind of a heavy-handed approach if you're using it absolutely with strict diligence. If you break out from it a little bit and you just use it to convert facts and figures into circumstances and narration, then it can be a nice tool. And some tables might need that heavy-handed approach in order to teach them to focus in on the game, but just be sure that as a DM, you're not trying to force players into this, that they have some buy-in. It's a great tool to bring up at session 0, and it can really enhance a game as long as everybody buys in. This next tip touches on a point that I have talked about a number of times before and that is kind of near and dear to my heart: foreshadowing. And when I say foreshadowing, I mean in all of its glory, both in and out of combat. Out of combat, foreshadowing can look like passive perception checks that find small clues to lead towards the discovery of a secret door or a treasure trove that's hidden somewhere in a room. It can sound like the scratching of rats trying to dig through the door that is between you and them, or the clatter of bones of skeletons having a couple of drinks around the fire. Foreshadowing out of combat means making sure that in any direction that the characters are going to go, they have some kind of meaningful piece of information to help them make the decision that they're facing. If they're going up to something and have to make a decision with zero information, it really pulls players out and makes it hard for them to get interested in their character's situation. Whereas small hints and clues, a draft coming from one path that doesn't come from another, even something as simple as that, it allows the players to make a decision that is a little more meaningful. Ideally, we want them to be able to try and predict what is in the directions where these noises come, but not be certain about the answer. This kind of foreshadowing really drags in the kinds of players that are super interested in the exploration pillar of the game, and it keeps them engaged and interested in the next choice that's going to be made. In combat, foreshadowing is also a super powerful tool, and one that can be used to really get your players thinking about what's happening. Usually I use foreshadowing in combat by suggesting what is going to be happening from the next enemy in the initiative order, and then asking them what their character is going to do. When they go to make that decision, they're making that decision thinking as their character about what might happen next, and when you're thinking about what's going to happen, you are way more engaged than when you're just thinking about what you're going to do instead of how it's going to impact the world. A lot of the advice when it comes to what makes for a good scene tells you that every scene has to have stakes and tension, but when you're looking for character immersion and the engagement of your players, that's not always true. The one thing that I have found that increases the immersion of your players the most and makes them the most engaged in their own story and the story of others is to give them scenes that are literally designed for nothing but character to character interactions. Campfire scenes where we run through the watch order with two people on watch and with loads of time to chatter together while they wait for the next person on watch to take their place. Running through those scenes has over the years been an absolute joy for me as I watch characters deliver little bits of their story and develop those stories as they chatter one amongst another. Naturally, this is a very low speed pace moment. You're going to probably want to make sure to bookend it with some high energy action immediately following these character-to-character scenes. Something else that you could do to improve your game would be to add more dialogue to your combats. When you're having a little bit of chatter back and forth between the enemy and the players, it gets kind of exciting as you trash talk one another and you dive into what kind of things those monsters or NPCs would say or do outside of the actual actions of hack and slash and tearing people apart with claws and all that sort of thing. What kind of information could you pass along with dialogue of some sort that would allow the players to interact a little bit more than just with their action choices on their turns? Recently I read a piece of advice on that same topic from Justin Alexander that suggested putting a character on your initiative tracker that is just labeled dialogue, and then making sure that at least every round when you come around to the dialogue box on your initiative tracker, whatever kind of tracker you're using at the time, you speak up on behalf of the creatures or NPCs that are present. That way you just have that extra prompt to do the thing, because the doing the thing is the important part. So hey, please give these a shot in your next game and let me know how it went. And if you have any ideas for engagement and immersion, then if you would drop them in the comment section so that we can share them with the community, that would be awesome. Working together, I am pretty confident that we can all improve our games of Dungeons and Dragons. Thanks for watching. Happy adventuring.